Listen close, because there's a beautiful, terrifying secret they never anticipated. Your silence isn't absence, it's a blade masquerading as calm. They expected rage, they prepared for fire, they trained for thunder, but silence isn't in their playbook. Anger is loud, anger is predictable. Anger is exactly what they want you to show, a response they can digest, fear, or mock. But silence is the void that swallows their strategy whole. When you don't roar, when you don't tremble, when you don't bite back, that's when they begin to unravel. Your quiet doesn't signal weakness, it broadcasts control. It's a message so potent that it forces them to project their own chaos onto themselves. They look for a crack, a twitch, a whisper of defeat, and when they find none, their confidence begins to rot. They start imagining battles that never happened. They start hearing your silence as an accusation, as a judgment, as a verdict. And here's the twist. They hate it. They fear it. Because they know deep down that when you don't react, you've already won. You've already stepped out of their story. You've already dismantled their narrative. Your silence becomes the echo in their mind that never fades, the question they can't answer, the mirror they're too afraid to look into. So don't speak, don't argue, don't justify, don't explain. Let them twist themselves into knots trying to hear meaning where there is none. Let their fury turn inward, their doubts grow louder, and their conviction crumble. Let your silence be the shadow that follows them, longer, heavier, sharper than any scream could ever be. Silence isn't empty, it's full of power, and that power doesn't break them with noise, it breaks them with nothing at all. Because here's the part nobody talks about. Silence doesn't just disturb them, it rewires the battlefield. The moment you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your character, stop performing pain for an audience that never cared, the whole energy shifts. They were ready for your paragraphs. They rehearsed their counter-arguments in the shower. They even practiced their fake sympathy face. But when you give them nothing, no speech, no meltdown, no grand finale, their script collapses in their hands. See, anger gives them something to fight. Silence gives them something to fear. When you don't respond, they start narrating for you. They must be hurt. They must be hurt. They're probably bitter. They'll come back. Notice how they need a story. Because your quiet forces them to confront the only voice left in the room. Their own. And that voice is not kind. It starts whispering things like, maybe I went too far. Maybe I misjudged them. Maybe I underestimated who they were becoming. That's when it happens. The slow crack, the doubt, the itch they can't scratch. Because silence is not passive, it's strategic, it's a decision. It says I refuse to bleed publicly for your entertainment. It says I've moved beyond the arena you're still pacing in. It says without saying anything at all, you no longer qualify for my energy. And that realization, oh, that stings deeper than any insult ever could. They wanted fireworks. You gave them a vacuum. They wanted chaos. You gave them stillness. And stillness is terrifying to someone who survives off reaction. Your calm becomes proof. Proof that you healed. Proof that you adapted. Proof that whatever they tried to break rebuilt itself stronger without them even noticing. Here's the funny part, the almost poetic part. The louder they get trying to provoke you, the more obvious it becomes that your silence is working. They poke, they post, they test, they accidentally mention your name. And you sip your peace like it's tea on a quiet morning. No rush, no performance, just evolution happening quietly behind the curtain. Because real power doesn't need an announcement. Real power doesn't argue. Real power walks away so completely that it feels like it vanished. And when they finally understand that your quiet wasn't weakness, it was detachment, that's when it hits them hardest. Not with a bang, not with a fight, but with a realization. You didn't lose your voice. You just decided they weren't worth hearing it anymore. And That breaks people in ways fury never could. And here's where it becomes almost unfair. Because while they're still replaying old conversations in their head like a scratched record, you're building in silence. You're learning. You're sharpening. You're upgrading parts of yourself they never even noticed. They thought the quiet meant you were stuck. They thought it meant you were hurting in a corner somewhere, waiting for closure, like it was a package that might finally arrive. But you weren't waiting. You were transforming. Silence is a workshop. It's where you rebuild your confidence without applause. It's where you study your mistakes without broadcasting them. It's where you let the emotions settle long enough to turn into wisdom instead of weapons. And while they were looking for a reaction, you were designing a reinvention. That's what makes it lethal. Because one day they look up and realize you're not the same person they tried to provoke. You don't flinch at the same triggers. You don't chase the same validation. You don't argue for the same scraps of attention. The buttons they used to push, they don't work anymore. And nothing unsettles someone more than losing control over the reaction they once owned. Silence doesn't just protect your peace, it upgrades your position. It gives you clarity. It shows you who panics when you pull back. It reveals who only valued you when you were loud, emotional, available on demand. And when you go quiet, the real ones stay steady. The rest starts scrambling. That scrambling, that's information. That's data. That's proof. There's something almost poetic about watching someone grow uncomfortable with your calm. They mistake it for coldness. They call it pride. They label it ego. But it's none of that. It's discipline. It's restraint. It's choosing not to trade your dignity for a moment of emotional release. And that restraint, that strength disguised as serenity. Because the truth is, you could respond. You could dismantle every lie. You could expose every inconsistency. You could set the record straight with precision. But you don't. Not because you can't. Because you don't need to. You've realized something they haven't. Closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from a decision. A quiet, internal decision that says, I'm done giving this my energy. And when you truly detach, your silence stops being a tactic and starts being a lifestyle. And that's when it hits them hardest. When they understand your quiet isn't temporary. It's permanent. It's not a pause. It's an exit. And nothing unsettles someone more than realizing they can't reach you anymore. Not through anger, not through nostalgia, not through guilt. You're not reacting because you're not engaged. You're not engaged because you've evolved. And evolution is silent. No announcement, no warning, just a shift. And by the time they feel the absence, you're already somewhere higher, calm, collected, unbothered, proving without a single word that sometimes the loudest move you can make is saying absolutely nothing at all. Oh, now it gets fun. Because let's be honest, part of the power of silence is watching people slowly lose their minds, trying to decode it. You don't respond for 3 days, and suddenly they're starring in their own psychological thriller. What are they thinking? Are they plotting? Did they move on? Meanwhile, you're just folding laundry and minding your business. Silence turns you into a mystery they can't Google. They check your page. Nothing dramatic. No sad quotes. No cryptic captions. Just normal life. Maybe even better life. And that's when the panic sets in. Because if you're okay without them, what does that say? See, anger gives them confirmation. Silence gives them imagination. And imagination. Oh, imagination is cruel. They'll build entire scenarios in their head where you're thriving, glowing, laughing with new people, leveling up in ways they never predicted. Half of it isn't even real, but they don't know that. And your quiet leaves room for their insecurity to write the script. And the funniest part, you're not even trying to intimidate them. You're just busy. Busy protecting your peace, busy upgrading your habits, busy becoming harder to disturb. They think it's some master plan, some calculated revenge arc. Meanwhile, you're over here like, no, I just stopped caring. That's what really shakes them. When they realize your silence isn't a game. It's not manipulation. It's not a dramatic pause before a big speech. It's genuine detachment. And detachment is terrifying to someone who used to trigger you with a single sentence. They send something subtle. You don't bite. They test the waters. You don't ripple. They try nostalgia. You respond with absolutely nothing. Now they're staring at their phone like it betrayed them. Silence is almost disrespectful in its simplicity. It says, I acknowledge your existence, but not enough to react. No yelling, no grand exit speech, just calm disappearance. It's like emotionally unsubscribing. And here's the twist. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You just learned that not every invitation deserves your attendance. Not every comment deserves your counterpoint. Not every situation deserves your energy. You've graduated from arguing. You've evolved past reacting. And that evolution, it's quiet, steady, and slightly amusing. Because while they're waiting for a showdown, you're out here enjoying the plot twist. Your silence didn't just break them, it confused them. And sometimes confusion hits harder than confrontation ever could. Oh, now it gets fun. Because let's be honest, part of the power of silence is watching people slowly lose their minds trying to decode it. You don't respond for 3 days and suddenly they're starring in their own psychological thriller. What are they thinking? Are they plotting? Did they move on? Meanwhile, you're just folding laundry and minding your business. Silence turns you into a mystery. They can't Google. They check your page. Nothing dramatic, no sad quotes, no cryptic captions, just normal life. Maybe even better life. And that's when the panic sets in. Because if you're okay without them, what does that say? See, anger gives them confirmation. Silence gives them imagination. And imagination? Oh, imagination is cruel. They'll build entire scenarios in their head where you're thriving, glowing, laughing with new people, leveling up in ways they never predicted. Half of it isn't even real, but they don't know that. And your quiet leaves room for their insecurity to write the script. And the funniest part, you're not even trying to intimidate them. You're just busy. Busy protecting your peace, busy upgrading your habits, busy becoming harder to disturb. They think it's some master plan, some calculated revenge arc. Meanwhile, you're over here like, no, I just stopped caring. That's what really shakes them. When they realize your silence isn't a game. It's not manipulation. It's not a dramatic pause before a big speech. It's genuine detachment. And detachment is terrifying to someone who used to trigger you with a single sentence. They send something subtle. You don't bite. They test the waters. You don't ripple. They try nostalgia. You respond with absolutely nothing. Now they're staring at their phone like it betrayed them. Silence is almost disrespectful in its simplicity. It says, I acknowledge your existence, but not enough to react. No yelling, no grand exit speech, just calm disappearance. It's like emotionally unsubscribing. And here's the twist. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You just learned that not every invitation deserves your attendance. Not every comment deserves your counterpoint. Not every situation deserves your energy. You've graduated from arguing. You've evolved past reacting. And that evolution, it's quiet, steady, and slightly amusing. Because while they're waiting for a showdown, you're out here enjoying the plot twist. Your silence didn't just break them, it confused them. And sometimes confusion hits harder than confrontation ever could. And here's where it becomes almost cinematic. Because the longer you stay quiet, the louder their thoughts become. At first, they tell themselves it's temporary. They'll respond eventually. Then a little more time passes, and suddenly your silence starts to feel intentional. That's when the overthinking kicks in. They replay old conversations, like detectives reviewing security footage. They zoom in on your last words. They analyze punctuation. They start looking for hidden meanings that don't exist. Meanwhile, you're just out here living, breathing, building, completely unaware that you've become the main character in their internal drama series. What makes it funny and powerful is that silence forces people to sit with themselves. And most people do not enjoy that activity. When you are reacting, arguing, defending, explaining, you are distracting them from their own behavior. Your emotions gave them something to focus on. But now, there's no smoke screen, no emotional fireworks, just a mirror. And the mirror is not flattering. It reflects the things they said, the way they acted, the way they underestimated you. And because you're not yelling back, they can't paint you as the villain. Your calm ruins that narrative completely. And here's the twist that feels almost unfair. The more peaceful you become, the more unsettled they feel. Not because you did anything dramatic, but because your stillness highlights their chaos. You don't chase, you don't correct rumors, you don't clap back, you just continue improving quietly. You glow up in ways that don't require announcements. You gain confidence that doesn't need validation. And nothing confuses someone more than watching a person they tried to disturb become unbothered and slightly amused. There's something hilariously powerful about knowing you could respond. You could dismantle every lie with precision. You could expose inconsistencies with facts. You could deliver a speech so sharp it echoes for weeks, and choosing not to. Not because you're weak, not because you're afraid, but because you've realized peace is more valuable than being right. That restraint, that's discipline, that's growth. That's realizing not every battle deserves your sword, especially when walking away wins the war. And let's admit something with a little grin. When you stop reacting, you accidentally become mysterious. You become unreadable. You become the plot twist they didn't prepare for. They expected noise. They expected tears. They expected long messages at midnight. Instead, they got silence and progress. That's almost comedic. They geared up for a dramatic sequel, and you canceled the show entirely. No finale, no encore, just credits rolling while you move on to a better production. Silence isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's understanding that your energy is currency, and you're no longer spending it on arguments that don't appreciate its value. It's realizing that some people only felt powerful when you reacted, and once you stopped reacting, the illusion of their power dissolved. That's the quiet truth they struggle with. Not your anger, not your words, but your indifference. Because indifference says something loud without saying anything at all, you no longer have access. And when someone loses access to your emotions, your reactions, your attention, that's when the real shift happens. Not explosive, not dramatic, just steady, calm, and slightly poetic. You didn't break them with rage. You didn't crush them with confrontation. You simply stepped back, leveled up, and let their own thoughts do the heavy lifting. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is none at all. And the longer it goes on, the clearer it becomes. Your silence wasn't a reaction. It was a recalibration. You didn't disappear because you were defeated. You disappeared because you were done negotiating your worth. There's a difference. One is retreat, the other is refinement. And refinement is quiet work. It happens behind closed doors, in early mornings, in late nights, in moments where nobody is watching and nobody is clapping. That's where you rebuilt your standards. That's where you strengthened your boundaries. That's where you decided that access to you would no longer be automatic. The amusing part, they still think this is about them. They assume your silence is a strategy aimed directly at their ego. They think you're trying to send a message. But the real twist is this. Your silence isn't about sending anything. It's about reclaiming something. Your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth. You stopped responding not to punish them, but to protect yourself. And protection looks a lot like indifference to the untrained eye. Here's what really unsettles people when they can no longer predict you. You used to respond fast. You used to care visibly. You used to engage. Now there's this calm distance, this measured stillness. It feels foreign to them. They reach out expecting the old version of you, and instead encounter composure. That composure feels like rejection. It feels like loss of control. It feels like they're knocking on a door that no longer opens automatically. And you're not even being dramatic about it. You're just not available for nonsense anymore. There's a quiet confidence that grows inside someone who has mastered the art of non-reaction. It's not flashy, it's not loud, it's subtle. It shows up in how you don't rush to explain yourself, in how you don't scramble to clear your name, in how you don't defend your peace to people who disturb it. That calm communicates something powerful. I am not here to convince you of my value. And that's the punchline. Because once you stop trying to prove yourself, the dynamic shifts permanently. They can no longer pull you into emotional chaos. They can no longer bait you into arguments. They can no longer use your passion against you. Your silence becomes a filter. The people who respect it stay. The people who thrived off your reactions fade. There's humor in it too. The quiet, almost smug kind. Watching someone escalate while you remain steady is like watching someone argue with a brick wall and blaming the wall for not participating. They get louder, you get calmer. They get more animated, you get more grounded. Eventually, they exhaust themselves, and you never broke a sweat. That's the lesson hidden inside all this stillness. Not every moment deserves your commentary. Not every accusation deserves your rebuttal. Not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation. Sometimes the most mature move is stepping back and allowing reality to reveal itself without your interference. And when the dust settles, when the noise fades, when the drama runs out of fuel, your silence will still be there. Not as a weapon, not as revenge, but as proof. Proof that you evolved. Proof that you learned restraint. Proof that you understood something they didn't. The strongest position in any conflict is the one who doesn't need to fight. And when you truly understand that, something inside you settles. Not the dramatic kind of settling, not the I've given up kind. It's the calm of someone who finally realizes they don't have to attend every emotional invitation that shows up at their door. You stop answering knocks that come with chaos attached. You stop opening messages that are disguised as closure, but really just want access to your energy again. You stop volunteering to be misunderstood, and that's when the power becomes almost unfair. Because now, your silence isn't forced. It isn't tense. It isn't you holding your tongue while your jaw clenches. It's natural, effortless. You genuinely don't feel the urge to react anymore, and that's what confuses them the most. They were prepared for resistance. They were prepared for emotion. They were prepared for sparks, but they were not prepared for your absence of urgency. There's something deeply unsettling about realizing you no longer trigger someone the way you used to. They test it. Subtle comments, little jabs, random check-ins that pretend to be casual but carry curiosity underneath. They're fishing for proof that they still matter in your emotional world, and when the line comes back empty, that silence feels louder than any argument you could have given them. Meanwhile, you're not playing a game. You're simply no longer available for nonsense. You've tasted peace, and it turns out it's addictive. You wake up without replaying conversations. You go to bed without rehearsing what you should have said. Your mind feels clearer, lighter, and once someone experiences that kind of mental quiet, they're very reluctant to trade it for chaos again. Here's the subtle humor in all of it. While they're trying to decode your silence like it's some complex riddle, the answer is incredibly simple. You grew up. You grew wiser. You grew tired of unnecessary noise. There's no secret mastermind plan. No hidden revenge strategy. Just maturity wearing comfortable shoes and walking away without drama. And maturity is intimidating. Because it can't be manipulated easily. It doesn't respond to guilt. It doesn't bend to emotional theatrics. It doesn't chase validation. It doesn't beg to be understood. It simply stands firm and lets time reveal everything. Over time, your silence starts doing something even more powerful. It becomes your boundary. Not a loud boundary, not one that requires a speech. Just a quiet line that says, beyond this point, my peace matters more than your opinion. And the people who respect that line adjust. The ones who don't, they expose themselves without you saying a word. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to argue your value. You don't have to fight for your reputation. You don't have to out-talk anyone. You let consistency speak. You let composure speak. You let your steady growth speak. And when they finally understand that your silence wasn't weakness, wasn't confusion, wasn't defeat, but composure, that realization lands heavier than any insult ever could. Because silence, when chosen from strength, says one unforgettable thing: I am no longer affected. And when someone realizes they've lost the ability to disturb your peace, that's when the real shift happens. Not loud, not explosive, just final. And final is a strange kind of quiet. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't send dramatic farewell speeches. It doesn't need a soundtrack. It just settles, like dust after a storm. One day they realize they haven't heard from you in a long time, and instead of anger, there's this uncomfortable awareness creeping in. You're not coming back to the version of yourself they were used to. That's when it really hits. Because silence over time stops feeling like a tactic and starts feeling like a new identity. You're no longer the person who reacts instantly. You're no longer the one who feels compelled to clarify every misunderstanding. You're no longer emotionally available for chaos disguised as conversation. You've stepped into something steadier, calmer, almost boring to drama, and that's the highest level you can reach. Here's the subtle twist nobody expects. The more grounded you become, the less interesting conflict feels. Arguments start looking like wasted energy. Petty comments start sounding like background noise. You don't feel superior, you just feel detached. And detachment is powerful because it cannot be forced. It only comes after you've truly processed, healed, and decided your peace is worth protecting. Meanwhile, the ones who relied on your reactions feel the shift immediately. It's like trying to press a button that used to light up and now nothing happens. No spark, no explosion, just stillness. They might try harder, louder words, sharper tones, more dramatic attempts to get your attention. And you stay level. Not because you're suppressing emotion, but because you've mastered it. That mastery is what changes everything. You realize that reacting is easy. Anyone can raise their voice. Anyone can fire off a message. Anyone can prove a point in the heat of the moment. But restraint? That takes strength. That takes self-awareness. That takes confidence in knowing you don't need to win every exchange to win in life. And here's where it gets quietly poetic. When you stop defending yourself, your consistency becomes your defense. When you stop explaining yourself, your character becomes your explanation. When you stop arguing, your results speak. And results have a way of silencing critics more effectively than any comeback ever could. There's even a hint of humor in watching the shift unfold. The same people who once thought your calm meant weakness now tread carefully. The same ones who mistook your kindness for softness now sense the boundary they can't cross. They don't say it out loud, but they feel it. You're not the same, not colder, not crueler, just stronger. And strength, when quiet, carries a weight that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't seek applause. It simply exists, steady and unmoved. That's the real transformation. Your silence didn't just protect you. It refined you. It showed you who respects calm and who thrives on chaos. It revealed which battles were worth your voice and which ones deserved your absence. It taught you that sometimes the most powerful move isn't to respond, it's to rise above the need to. And when you fully step into that space, when your peace feels more valuable than proving a point, something shifts permanently. You stop reacting. You start leading. You stop defending. You start building. You stop explaining. You start evolving. You start evolving. And evolution, real evolution, doesn't shout. It walks forward quietly and never looks back. And when you never look back, something inside you locks into place. Not in a cold way, not in a bitter way, but in a grounded, almost serene way. You realize that closure was never something someone else was supposed to hand you wrapped in a neat explanation. Closure was the moment you stopped needing them to understand you. The moment you stopped rehearsing imaginary conversations in your head. The moment you decided peace felt better than being right. That's when silence becomes effortless. You're not biting your tongue anymore. You're not counting to 10. You're not forcing yourself to stay calm. You genuinely don't feel the urgency to respond. And that's the level that unsettles people the most. When your composure isn't performance, it's default. They start to notice the shift in subtle ways. You don't overshare anymore. You don't defend your decisions publicly. You don't explain your moves. You just make them. Quietly, strategically, confidently. And the mystery of that drives some people crazy. Because if they can't predict you, they can't control the narrative about you. Here's the part that feels almost ironic. The quieter you become, the louder your life speaks. Your discipline shows. Your focus sharpens. Your distractions decrease. You invest your energy into growth instead of gossip, into building instead of battling. And while others are still trying to provoke a reaction from the version of you that used to exist, you're operating on an entirely different frequency. Silence isn't isolation, it's intention. It's choosing conversations that add value instead of noise. It's choosing environments that nourish instead of drain. It's choosing to keep certain wins private and certain struggles sacred. And there's something deeply powerful about a person who doesn't need the world to witness every chapter of their transformation. The funny thing, over time, your silence stops being controversial. It becomes respected. The same calm that once confused people starts commanding a different kind of energy. They speak more carefully around you. They assume less. They project less. Because they sense that you're not someone easily shaken anymore. You didn't harden. You strengthened. You didn't detach from humanity. You detached from chaos. And there's a big difference. You still care. You still feel. You still have a voice. You've just become selective about when and where you use it. And selectiveness is a sign of maturity. It's knowing that your voice is valuable and not every room deserves to hear it. Eventually, the realization settles on everyone involved. You weren't silent because you had nothing to say. You were silent because you had nothing left to prove. And when someone truly has nothing left to prove, they move differently. They move calmly. They move deliberately. They move without seeking validation. That's the final level. Not revenge. Not dominance. Not even detachment. Just peace. Steady, quiet, unshakable peace. And once you reach that place, silence isn't a weapon anymore. It's a lifestyle. And that lifestyle, it changes everything. And when it becomes a lifestyle, you stop announcing growth and start embodying it. You don't feel the need to post about discipline. You just practice it. You don't lecture about boundaries. You enforce them quietly. You don't warn people about losing access. They simply discover it when the door no longer opens the way it used to. That's the shift. That's the level most people never reach because it requires something uncomfortable, self-control. Self-control is not flashy. It doesn't trend. It doesn't get applause, but it changes the entire dynamic of your life. The moment you master your reactions, you master your direction. You stop being steered by other people's moods. You stop being baited into arguments that drain you. You stop mistaking volume for strength. And once that happens, something powerful takes root inside you. Steadiness. Steadiness is intimidating. It's hard to compete with someone who doesn't compete. It's hard to disturb someone who doesn't engage. It's hard to provoke someone who has already decided that their peace is non-negotiable. The old triggers stop working. The emotional hooks don't land. And that's when people realize the version of you they thought they understood is gone. But here's the important part. You didn't become silent to win. You became silent to grow. Winning was just a byproduct, because silence creates space. Space to think clearly, space to see patterns, space to recognize who shows up only when there's drama, and who shows up when things are calm. When you step back, you start observing instead of reacting. And observation is a superpower. You notice tone shifts. You notice inconsistencies. You notice who respects your boundaries without complaint, and who resents them immediately. Silence sharpens awareness, and awareness makes you harder to manipulate. Over time, you develop a quiet confidence that doesn't require comparison. You're not trying to outshine anyone. You're not trying to outtalk anyone. You're simply operating at a higher level of composure. And composure has gravity. It draws respect naturally, even from people who once underestimated you. There's something almost poetic about the transformation. The person who used to feel misunderstood now feels centered. The person who once felt the need to defend themselves now feels secure. The person who once reacted quickly now pauses, reflects, and chooses wisely. That pause, that's power. Because in that pause lives clarity. In that pause lives maturity. In that pause lives the understanding that not every situation deserves your emotional investment. And once you consistently choose peace over pride, growth over gossip, discipline over drama, your life begins to align differently. You attract calmer environments. You attract conversations with substance. You attract people who don't need chaos to feel alive. That's when you realize something profound. Silence wasn't about breaking anyone else. And it was about building yourself. It was about proving, not to them, but to you, that you can remain steady regardless of who tries to shake you. And when you can remain steady, you become unstoppable in the most unbothered way possible. Not loud, not aggressive, not dramatic, just focused, just disciplined, just peaceful. And peace, when maintained with strength, becomes the most powerful statement you could ever make without saying a single word. And once you settle into that kind of peace, something almost humorous starts happening. You begin to realize how much of your old stress came from conversations that didn't deserve you in the first place. You start remembering arguments that once felt world-ending, and now they feel small. Not because your emotions weren't real back then, but because your perspective has grown wider. Distance has a way of shrinking things that once looked enormous. That's the hidden gift of silence, perspective. When you stop reacting immediately, you start seeing clearly. You see who was projecting. You see who was deflecting. You see who only felt powerful when you were emotional. And instead of getting angry about it, you almost smile, not in a smug way. In a wow, I really used to lose sleep over that kind of way. There's growth in that realization. You start choosing your responses like a strategist instead of a fighter. You don't rush. You don't chase closure. You don't demand understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply observe, adjust, and move accordingly. And the calm confidence that comes from that, it's quiet but undeniable. Here's the part that feels almost poetic. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you start improving yourself. Your energy shifts inward. You invest in discipline. You refine your habits. You build skills. You expand your thinking. And slowly the life you're building becomes louder than any argument you could have won. That's the real victory. Not winning the debate, not delivering the final word, but leveling up so thoroughly that the debate no longer matters. There's even a subtle grace in it. You no longer wish anyone harm. You don't fantasize about revenge speeches. You don't rehearse what I should have said. You genuinely wish people well from a distance, because wishing them well costs nothing. Re-engaging with chaos costs everything. And that maturity, that's the part people don't talk about enough. Growth isn't just becoming stronger. It's becoming calmer. It's becoming less reactive. It's becoming selective with your time and deliberate with your voice. Silence teaches you that your attention is valuable, your reactions are valuable, your emotional energy is valuable. And when something is valuable, you don't hand it out recklessly. You protect it. You invest it wisely. You guard it with discernment. And over time, that discernment becomes instinct. You walk into situations already knowing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. You no longer feel the urge to fix every misunderstanding. You no longer feel obligated to attend every emotional showdown. You simply choose the path that keeps your mind steady and your focus intact. That's the final shift. When peace stops being something you chase and starts being something you maintain. And maintenance requires consistency. It requires discipline. It requires humility. But once you master it, once you truly embody it, you move differently. You speak less but mean more. You argue less but accomplish more. You prove less but achieve more. And in the end, your silence isn't about breaking anyone else. It's about demonstrating to yourself that you've evolved beyond the need to be heard in every room. Because sometimes the strongest presence in the room is the one that doesn't need to raise its voice at all. And once you realize that, something almost liberating clicks into place. You stop measuring your strength by how loudly you can defend yourself and start measuring it by how steadily you can hold your ground. There's a quiet dignity in that, a composure that doesn't need to be explained. You're not shrinking, you're not suppressing, you're choosing. Choosing when to speak, choosing when to walk away, choosing when something simply isn't worth your pulse rising over. That choice is everything. Because when you control your reactions, you control your direction. No one gets to steer your mood with a comment. No one gets to hijack your focus with drama. No one gets to press a button and watch you explode for entertainment. The buttons still exist, you're just no longer wired to respond. And that's the real transformation. There's a calm authority that develops in someone who no longer reacts impulsively. It's subtle, but people feel it. Conversations shift, dynamics adjust. Even silence in a room carries weight when it comes from someone grounded. You don't need to dominate space, you stabilize it. And stabilizing a space is far more powerful than controlling it. The irony? The same people who once mistook your calm for weakness begin to treat you differently. They measure their words more carefully. They test you less. Not because you threaten them, but because your steadiness makes emotional chaos look childish by comparison. And here's the mature truth inside all of this. Silence is not about being passive. It's about being intentional. It's not about avoidance. It's about prioritization. It's not about indifference to life. It's about indifference to unnecessary conflict. You still have fire. You still have passion. You still have conviction. You just don't waste it on battles that don't align with your growth. That restraint doesn't dull your strength, it refines it. And over time, something beautiful happens. Your peace becomes visible, not because you announce it, but because it radiates through your consistency. You show up steady. You respond measured. You handle setbacks without spectacle. You correct without cruelty. You walk away without theatrics. That's leadership energy. That's maturity energy. That's evolution. And when you fully settle into that frequency, something else changes. You stop worrying about who misunderstands you, because people committed to misunderstanding will do it loudly, whether you defend yourself or not. So instead of exhausting yourself trying to control perception, you focus on controlling your character. Character outlasts commentary. Consistency outlasts criticism. Calm outlasts chaos. And when the dust of drama finally settles, because it always does, what remains is not the loudest voice, it's the most stable presence. That's you. Not because you shouted, not because you argued, not because you proved them wrong, but because you stayed grounded while everything else shook. And that kind of strength doesn't need to speak often. It only needs to exist.